Well, good evening, everyone. Hope you guys are enjoying the fall spring we have going on here. As Cassidy said, we're gonna be presenting. I'm the Southern Pharmacobiologist covering from about Franklin County south. And Evan is with us. He'll introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm on the exact opposite side of the state as Cody. I'm up in the northwestern corner, Knox County and Henry County and those surrounding areas. So, yeah, two totally opposite sides of the state here, but collaborating on talking about urban habitat and small scale habitat implementation.
All right, so kick us off. Some of the things we're going to be chit-chatting about today are the actual definition of urban and small scale, some terms and benefits of those that we're going to be using throughout the presentation today, where we can implement some of these practices, some site prep and management tactics, planting zones and some of your dates that might apply to your specific zone, and funding opportunities and some of the active PFQF projects that we got going on as of right now. So, and we're off. The web generated, if you go into Google, this is the first thing you're going to see is the urban wildlife is wildlife that can live and thrive in urban, suburban environments. So for this presentation, we're going to be using it kind of simultaneously with this definition of just any land improvement that will enhance the quality of habitat for your surrounding wildlife, meaning that it can be anything from deer all the way down to insects. So it doesn't have to be in an urban or suburban setting. That's why we included the small scale habitat aspect into this as well. We don't want to disclude just because you're not in the city limits that you're not urban habitat. So the
Well,
just to clarify, go ahead.
yeah, it's important to note too that there's no such thing as too small of an improvement or too small of an implementation of these native habitats, right? So
Mhm.
obviously, if you're looking to benefit quail or pheasant, you're going to need a little more ground. But a lot of this presentation will be about pollinators because that's what the smaller scale habitat directly affects. So it's just important to remember that no matter what you do, no matter how small your yard is or how small of an area you have to put native plants on, it's never too small to do it.
Yes, sir. So bottom up management. So some of the examples that we're going to be talking about today, and some of the terms that we'll be using will be landscaping. You'll hear buffer, corridor, area like air quality concerns, some water quality concerns, and some pond runoff areas. To our right here, that's just kind of a quick example of what we're talking about with landscaping. We're going to have some more here coming soon, but a lot of presumptions are that landscaping with natives are just weedy. It's very uncontrolled. It's very out of the norm. And as you can see here, it's just there's nothing really weedy about it. It's very pretty. It's very appealing, but it also benefits everything in the area on the same note. So this is some more examples of what we were talking about with landscaping. Very clean cut, we still get that manicured look, but instead of having the annual renewal that you have with annual ornamentals and stuff that you can buy at your local nursery. You won't have to make that yearly trip anymore. You can plant your black-eyed Susans, your purple cone flowers, um, your blazing stars all throughout, and they will come back every year just as pretty as they were last year. So some of the benefits that we're going to be talking about quickly are promoting the native plant biodiversity. So in your local surrounding area, these birds will take this seed and go and transplant it somewhere else and drop it. If we're planting natives, we don't have to worry about being that person that has, autumn olive in our backyard, and those birds taking that berry to our neighbor's yard and dropping an autumn olive in their yard. So we're not promoting invasive spreads. We're not promoting ornamental spreads. Uh, we can just we can sleep well at night knowing that we're not part of the spread of those such species. Some other stuff that we're going to be jumping into are promoting a more balanced food chain. So, like we said before, bottom up management. We are starting with the insects. We're starting with the bees, the pollinators, and it'll snowball up from there. So then we'll attract everything else from, the birds, the rodents like squirrels and mice and all those things that will hang out and do their business in the garden. Providing shelter for numerous different species. And like I said, these are perennial plants. They don't require a yearly subscription. Lower maintenance rather than traditional lawns. So these guys do not require you going out and watering and setting up your irrigation system and potential water breaks during the winter. You will plant them, you'll water them for the first, little bit to get them going. And then after that, the roots will take hold and you're good to go. You don't have to water them anymore. So no annual subscription, no watering, just overall lower maintenance. Um, and then obviously the soil health. The roots going down that far and in that depth, it's going to do your carbon fixation. It's gonna hold more carbon, and you're gonna allow your soil to actually build microbes, uh, rather than having to dig them up and replant ornamentals every year. So, anything else on that, Evan?
Yeah, I just think it's cool that obviously by planting these native plants, you're um, providing more habitat and you're providing um, wildlife with substantial amount of food and you're creating biodiversity, which is obviously very important. But it's also benefiting you. And right now, I mean, I would say most of us, um, money is an issue, right? When you're looking at implementing these things, you think it may be too expensive, or you're running into snags on your site prep or whatever just because of a money issue. And it is something to look at that you will be saving money in the long term. Even if you're just turning a portion of your yard, you're saving money, like Cody said, irrigation wise, but then also mowing, right? You're taking that area out of your mowing sequence, or if you mow twice a week, or if you mow,
Mhm.
once every other week, you're saving money gas wise and time wise. And so it is benefiting wildlife, of course, but it's also benefiting you.
Good ad, good ad. All right. Some of the
Yeah.
next things we're going to talk about buffers. Um, Evan brought up a pretty funny story on this one, but as far as the concept behind this, I'll let him interject here in a minute. You guys will enjoy it. The the aquatic health and the filtration aspects of this. So all of the runoff coming from everyone's lawn and the surrounding areas going into these buffers. This is actually an example of an aquatic buffer for a pond, but they don't necessarily have to be next to a pond. They can be next to a fence. They can be next to, a forest edge. You're just allowing that soft edge aspects. We have more illustrations for that later, but we'll explain more of what an edge is later. Um, this eliminates the hazard and dangerous management. Evan's going to touch on that. And
Yeah.
then the invasive aggressive species suppression. So our beloved Phragmites and Johnson grass and tall fescue, they love these aquatic edges. So us planting natives right there and just going ahead and out competing them off the get-go, that's kind of our goal here is to not allow them to establish because once they are, good luck.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So I'll kick it off with kind of my funny but not so funny story. So when I was in high school and college, my summers I worked at a golf course. I was a mower and did a lot of plant management and stuff out there. And one morning, I actually watched as one of my coworkers got a little too close to the pond edge with his mower, and his tire caught on the edge, and he ended up rolling it into the water because he was trying to get too close to it. Right, and he was fine. He wasn't hurt or anything, but we did lose a lot of money on that mower. We had to get a new one. It was completely destroyed. And it's just something to look at, right? Because obviously you can see in this picture, um, that buffer goes up to where that slope really begins. And it provides two separate things: the aquatic health through the filtration. Just when that water is running off that slope, it's first going to hit the native plant and the native grasses before it gets down to the water. So that's going to help filter out any pesticides or anything that's being used above slope on that. But then also, you're eliminating the need to mow constantly or eliminating the need to go out down and weed whack, which can be dangerous. Um, so you're saving money mowing. You're helping out the aquatic life. You're keeping some of the pesticides and some of the sediment runoff um, from really filtering. in and causing sediment pile up and sediment build up in that pond. And then, again, you're being safer. So it's something that is benefiting wildlife, but once again, like I stated earlier, it's something that's benefiting you as well.
Good job. All right, so we're going to talk about corridors pretty quickly. So as far as just connectivity, we can see it down at the bottom left-hand corner. This doesn't necessarily have to be as up to the magnitude of what that top right picture is, like crossing an interstate. It does not have to be. That's just the very extreme version of a corridor. As we see in the bottom left, that could be two villages that are kind of just have a heavy traffic between them, a couple main roads, a main retention ditch or something of that nature, a ravine that kind of separate the two. But it could be just yards. It could be there's habitat on one side of the town and there's habitat on the other side of the town, and you guys are the connecting tissue that would make up a corridor. So that's the point of this entire presentation is to allow everyone to know that they're just playing that puzzle piece to allow us to connect habitats that normally would not be. This also reduces just a lot of dangerous situations because when animals are pressed for nutrients and pressed for food or broodery and cover, they're going to find it somewhere. And your attic might be it. Your under your foundation might be it. Your under your porch. So if anyone's ever, ran into a raccoon hanging out underneath their porch, it's because they don't really have anywhere else to go. They're very generalist animals, but uh, here in the near future, if we start pressing, certain species far enough, they might be coming in as well. I used to be a wildlife technician in the Phoenix metro area, and it wasn't uncommon to find bobcats in your backyard and mountain lions in a couple outskirts. There was actually one in a above an eave hanging out, and it's going to become more and more of that if we don't find a way to live with these guys. So this natural bridge actually is over I-80 in Utah, and they did a study with over 700 animals, being about 30 different species, mainly large animals, so anywhere from bear, moose, mule deer, and a couple other large animals that are using this continuously. They ID'd these throughout the entire 2021 year. This was only a little while after getting it established, so as it stays there longer, it will continue to attract more and more migratory patterns and animals will adjust to it. So, like I said, that's an extreme version. We're just talking about connecting habitats here. So that's what a corridor actually means.
Cody made a great point in saying that if you want to go back a slide, sorry,
Yep,
force
yep.
you too quick. But
Go ahead.
no, he made a great point at saying, obviously, we're not expecting, these bridges to be over every interstate every mile. That's not what we're suggesting. But what we're suggesting is changing your yard, half your yard from mowed grass to pollinator and connecting habitat through that, whether it be every other house or if you get lucky enough and your whole neighborhood wants to do it. By doing that makes a substantial difference. I mean, truthfully, you're connecting now. Let's say it's 40 acres on one side and 40 on the other. Instead of just having that 40 acres to sustain a population, you now have 80. And then plus all of that yard that you added, maybe that adds another 5 acres. So now you have 85 acres to sustain a population. And obviously, we all know animals do better in bigger areas, right? The more food they can get to, the more bedding areas for the larger animals. So it is something to take kind of what we started with was when we said there's nothing too small, right? There's no too small of a project. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about connection between you and fellow landowners, and you're actually helping everything.
All right. Evan's gonna take off on this one. We do have. I do want to mention we looked up tall fescue roots just because it's not in our illustration, and everyone I know down here in Southern Illinois swears by fescue and it holds the earth together. And if we look at our diagram here, let me move this out of the way. We have June grass. It's the third one over from the right. That is about equivalent to fescue roots. So just to put that in perspective before we start chatting about it.
Yeah. So air quality wise, what we're really talking about is biological carbon sequestration, which I know that's a big word, and it was a topic I was really, curious about before I started this presentation. And basically what we can summarize it as is atmospheric carbon stored in bark, tissues, and root systems of plants. And so why are natives better than, as Cody was suggesting, your tall fescue that is everywhere, right? So native plants have deep roots, and deep roots equal more storage. So if you can see here in the smaller illustration, it shows your annual crops, so your corn, your soybeans, and you can see how short those roots are, how they don't go very deep, and that's because they're annuals. They're going to grow. They're quick growers. They're quick producers. Just to the left of that, you see a tame pasture. So to me, that means something that's managed every year, whether that be baled or grazed, etc. And then you look again to the left, and it's the native pasture. And just from the annual crop to the native pasture, I mean, that's 3 times the length of roots right there. And we're not saying that that's kind of getting away from the small scale aspect, right? But that's kind of why we brought in the other illustration. All the way over there on the left, you see turf grass. You can barely see it because that's how short the roots are. They're only 3 to 5 inches in length. Let's say you were to turn that turf grass into big blue stem and switchgrass in your backyard with some purple cone flower and a compass plant or two. Now all of a sudden you have variation in root depth, which is super important for soil health, as Cody had discussed earlier. But yeah, I mean, some of those roots are getting down to what, 15 feet, with an average of those being 10 foot. So that's just
Mhm.
that much more surface area um, for that carbon sequestration to happen through those roots, which obviously one person, once again, doing this is not going to make a noticeable change. But if this is to be something that's implemented small scale habitat on a large scale, basis, then we can really start to see the positive effects of this biological carbon sequestration through the native plants with their deep roots.
One last thing I want to touch on is I just want to challenge everybody is if you're out walking around or hiking and you see a compass flower or compass plant, just to prove kind of how deep these roots actually go, if you grab the middle of the leaf at the base of it, you can feel how cold it is because it's pulling water from 15 feet below the earth. So no matter how hot it is during the day, if you're in a pinch, there's cold water in there.
There you
So
go.
um, so he's going to take it on right here.
And water quality and air quality are kind of the same idea, right? But with water quality, those native roots, the deep roots, are going to reduce the transportation of nutrients and sediments to bodies of water that we as humans utilize or wildlife will utilize. So, how it does that is the interception of pollutants. These deep roots are covering a bigger surface area. They're able to intercept more of these pollutants and at a higher rate. And by doing that, they're going to keep that out of your drinking water, out of the water table, out of your pet's water if it's drinking out of the hose in the backyard, right? It's going to help keep that away from humans and pets, which obviously we all know pesticides and herbicides do have side effects when they're in direct contact with us. So that's one thing that native plants, as this picture shows, it slows it down, the spread of these pollutants and the filtration of these pollutants, and it soaks it up. It soaks up and it holds that pollutant, which is a really cool quality of these native grasses and forbs.
Really. Some of the last things we're going to touch on, as far as just the benefits and kind of terms we're going to be using is just water absorption. Everyone's kind of aware that, plants are going to absorb water. But with that magnitude of roots and how deep they go, they're just covering more area. They're able to soak up and dry up your yard that much quicker. As we see in the top right here, we're going to look at just a typical foundation that you're going to see on some of these new build homes that they will scalp your land and throw turf grass in without any intervening from us. we could plant, our native grasses right up next to that, and that erosion and that sliding of that actual foundational dirt would never happen. Just because of the root structure. It's going to go, 10 to 15 feet down and actually grab, and it won't be going anywhere. As far as resiliency as well, if we have droughts, these things are pulling from 8 to 10 feet down. Um, they're going to be a lot more tolerant to, dry spills, as well. Your neighbor's ornamentals are going to die typically, and your grass is going to struggle, but these natives are not going to. They're going to be okay. So water absorption entirely, soil, soil structure and actual resiliency to weather changes are some last big pluses for these natives. It doesn't I don't know if you guys have this problem, but in my yard, I have consistent clay almost throughout. So it just pulls at the top. So it's not allowing, that the roots are not breaking up that clay enough to allow it to infiltrate. So it just sits on top of my yard for until the sun, evaporates it to that point. Um, so yeah, I mean, unless everyone's inclined to change out sidewalks every 5 or 10 years, and more power to you, but I don't like doing concrete work. So,
I want to touch on the ponding point too.
mhm.
It says there it reduces stagnant water, right? So Cody was saying the ponding is going to hold just where water is held on top of the surface for an extended period of time. And I always think too, stagnant water. What is the first thing you think of? I think of mosquitoes. That is a perfect breeding ground for these insects, the gnats and the mosquitoes, to to breed. And by limiting that, you're limiting, you know, the diseases that these mosquitoes can carry and these other insects that are using that stagnant water. So by doing that, I mean, yes, you're helping your yard because now you don't have to mow through a puddle, but you're also limiting those mosquitoes, you're limiting those other insects that can have a profound effect on you as a person.
All right. And just we're going to touch on some of the species that we have seen directly affected by, pollinator planting, native planting, and just bunch grass planting, the things that are actually going to go into the native plants that we're speaking on. Some of the songbirds that you'll see is your goldfinch, your chipping wrens, your residential species that are around your house, typically the jays. Those will all visit plants of these nature and get them before they even seed. So they're, as you see in the left picture, they're going to get food from these things. They're going to get shelter from these things because game birds, in the same aspect of this slide, will burrow just like those bunnies. So they require last year's bunch grass to create burrows. And with a winter like we just had, those burrows are crucial to allow them to survive a snow. The seeds that dropped are crucial for them to survive. And if anyone has noticed, while you're driving down the road, whenever a big snow hits, the only thing standing are the native prairies. Our residue on the crops and everything that we all assume that, these things are going to survive on. They're level, they're flat. There's no snow on it. There's just one level sheet of snow. So, um, amphibians, small mammals such as the rabbits that you'll see in the picture, pollinators like the butterflies, the beetles, all the insects that are going to come with that are all just part of the food chain and will allow this healthy, diverse system. So, anything else?
No, that was good. Yeah, definitely the food chain is the big thing, right? Just by putting in these plants, you're gonna bring insects no matter what, basically. Um, and if you make enough habitat and enough quality habitat, you'll start to see the bigger animals and
Mhm.
your pheasants and your quail come as well.
And I think one of the biggest things I forgot to touch on was the migratories. Yes, we're going to support our residential guys, but I honestly think Susan down the road feeds all of them anyways. So if we all plant natives, all the migratories that are coming through, they will rely on that on their way down. So we all have a little part to play. But I think Evan's going to touch on this one.
Yeah, so just basically your urban native integration, right? So this is your sidewalks, you're deep in a city type scenario. And what it is, it's adding native species back into our public spaces, like the sidewalk easements of a town and a village, or even their greenscapes, right? If they have an open plot of land next to a park. But then something I think is really interesting is also throughout commercial landscaping. No matter what, there's going to be commercial landscaping companies, right? And if that's something that we can tap into, as conservationists, as an organization, to try to get those plants changed, to try to tell them the benefits of your native plants against your ornamentals, how it's going to save them money in the long run, how they're, to me, better to look at, right? But also just the benefits to the local migrating wildlife. You see your monarchs, right? You see those in downtown if there's habitat for them. They will use that as a corridor to get to the other side. Maybe there's a bigger pollinator plot down the road, but they will use that. And obviously, again, it's more resilient to extreme weather. They're going to stand up through that snow, through the wind that's howling down those big city streets. They'll stand up to that and they'll be way more resilient. And then kind of how I was touching that, trying to get a hold of these commercial landscapers and talk with them about the benefits of native plants. They're not going to need to spend the money and the time to go out and water each one of these like they do with the potted
Mhm.
plants that are on the sidewalk or the bushes that are, planted in the mulch. If you're able to establish these successful plantings of the natives, I mean, it's going to save you time and money. And then obviously we've talked about it a couple of times now, just the deeper roots for the better soil retention. You're going to limit your erosion. You're going to help those sidewalks, their longevity, their life. They're going to last longer. You're not going to have to spend the money on new concrete.
Absolutely. One last thing, Evan, is everyone is allowed to write your municipal governing body and go up there and present these pictures and say that this is kind of what I'm presenting instead of the sidewalk ornamentals that we have or the sidewalk grass that we have that you're required to mow. Um, like we said, it lowers cost, it lowers labors, so we can focus more on potholes rather than mowing grass. All right. This is a integration I threw into here. I'm originally from Texas, so this one kind of hits close to home. We had enough concerned citizens that we uh, collaborated and wrote a bunch of towns, and we actually got Texas DOT to start planting natives along roadsides. And now they are committed every year to planting over 30,000 pounds of seed per year. This delays the mowing period until they do mow it at the very end of the blooming period and whenever the migrators are already through. But it adds that refreshing aspect throughout the entire summer and the spring of just seeing those bloomers constantly on the side. It's just less, we just know that we're doing our part in that point as far as planting those instead of having to constantly mow it. Because by the time you get to one end, you're going back and mowing it again. And it's just a constant routine for 6 months out of the year. So we're saving diesel, we're saving tractor time, allowing them to refocus their hours on other projects that may come up. So that's more of large scale, but it can happen. If it starts in urban areas, we can push that for IDOT as well. I used the term edge back in the slideshow, and this is just a quick example of that. Um, if anyone has forest edge right outside of town, or they have a fence line that they want to play into, or a shrub or a hedge bush or something, you can manipulate and plant these native grasses up against that to create that soft edge. There's some big benefits to having a soft edge because there's so many species that rely on it. They cannot survive with a hard edge because they don't nest or eat in just fields or forest stands. So if you don't have that middle ground to bed in and to stay in, they won't be able to survive there. So uh, clean cutting all the way up to a fence line, or if you have a forest edge and clean cutting all the way up to the forest edge and mowing all the way up to it isn't helping the cause. So we promote soft edges in almost every application possible. If you have an application and you're not sure how to soft edge it, you're more than welcome to drop us a line after this. Our contact information will be at the end. just email us a couple pictures and we'll set up a call with you.
Right. And essentially what the soft edge is the buffer we were talking about earlier, right? I showed the picture of the one with the pond because we were able to talk about filtration, and I was able to interject my story. But um, the buffer, it is essentially just a soft edge. So these two definitely play hand in hand, and you can have those buffers on not just your aquatic habitat, but also your timbers. And Cody made a really good point on the fence line, right? Instead of mowing all the way up or cropping all the way up to that fence line, leaving just a buffer makes a huge difference in the amount of wildlife and the amount of habitat they have on your property.
Right. So now we're going to get into some site prep. Evan, I think you have this one.
Yep. So why is site prep necessary? Right. It'd be pretty cool if you could just go throw some seed out there and in a couple weeks you'd see your flowers and your tall grasses and everything. But most of us know that's just not the case. So why is it necessary? Well, for one, it eliminates the seedling competition for nutrients and sunlight with the existing vegetation. So by clearing out, by burning that brome off before you seed, or by spraying the brome and the phragmites to get it out of the way before you seed, you're creating a good seed bed. You're giving the natives the best chance for survival because they don't have to compete with these already established vegetation. It also allows for a dense stand of the desired native pollinators because you're getting better seed germination rate and lower competition. It's basically what we just said in number one. I mean, you're just giving it more area and you're giving it a better chance of survival. And if you can do that early on, then you'll see the effects of it. You'll see a stronger stand, see a more dense stand later on. And also these seeds can be planted during optimal seasons, right? We'll go through in these next couple slides. Cody will talk about the different seeding times and the different seeding zones, but it does give you kind of some leniency on the site prep, right? You have time to prepare for it. It's not something where you have to hit it in a 3-day window in order for it to be successful. You'll have time, and there's technically two different seeding times. So one may work better for you than the other, and Cody will get to that here soon. And then also just the integrated watering systems and drainage systems that could already be there, right? I don't know if you have anything to add on number 4, Cody, but that's all I really have.
No, so site prep is definitely important. We're going to jump into some of these actual types of site prep. We're going to kind of skim through these because I know a lot of people that do any sort of gardening are kind of aware of how to prep ground. And that way we can get through the next few slides and we can get to the end of the slideshow. So this is just a method that we're all aware of. In small scale, it's super advantageous, especially because of herbicidal restrictions that you may have in your area. Smothering can be organic, which is the cardboard you see over there, or tarps, which is what you see on the right. This is kind of an experiment they did with the 3-week to 6-week to 9-week tarping, and by the end of the 9 weeks, you have a clear cut ground, bare grass to work with, and sometimes hiring out is not an option with the low budget or you're just doing this as a community project. You don't have a lot of funds to throw at this. Maybe smothering might be the option because you can just wait your 9-week period and then you can go ahead and push forward with what you got to do as far as planting goes. Um, Super low intensity. You can go out with a couple of people, tarp this stuff. You don't have to pull weeds. You don't have to burn. You don't have to hire a spray guy to come out. Labor times just significantly lower. Decomposition and reusable. So your tarps, you can pull them up, use them every year in that area, or you can continue to move on to another project because once again, these are not annuals. They are perennials. They will come back. You can use that tarp for the next project. So this encourages also seed germination and uses humidity and temperature. After you uh, seed and you want to protect them, you can actually, instead of putting your black one back down, you can put your clear one down, and that creates the greenhouse effect of increasing humidity and creating that good temperature while mitigating birds coming down and taking your seeds. So if it is small scale, those are some things that you could probably do pretty quickly and get done within, that 2 or 3 month period. Anything else?
No, I just think that this is a really cool way to do it, and really cost effective, right? I
Hmm.
mean, a couple $10 tarps for your backyard beats going out and renting a sprayer, a backpack sprayer or whatever, and getting your herbicide and spraying that and doing it multiple times, and then getting your garden tiller out and doing that for a day, right? I mean, this is a real simple way to do it, and it's almost like a hands-off approach. You put it down and that's it. You wait your time period until you have to pull it. You don't have to continuously do prep.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about everyone's favorite chemical. And in some cases, it is the most effective, right? It's the most effective at really eliminating the vegetation. Um, but it's mainly used in conjunction with others, which we'll get to here in a second. Because just by killing the standing vegetation, you're still leaving it on the surface. And by doing that, it's going to limit you to how you can seed that, right? You wouldn't be able to broadcast if there's residue on the site because that seed really needs good seed to soil contact. And if you have a bunch of dead grass on top, you won't be getting that. So, kind of leads us into the next point is it can be more expensive. Um, I mean, just the sheer cost of it, but then also how you're applying it. If you have to go get a sprayer for the back of your ATV or your four wheeler, if you have to go get a backpack sprayer, these are all expensive options when in comparison to the smothering technique Cody just talked about. And he also hit on the possible restrictions or limitations due to being inside city limits. And it is worth noting too that, um, if you were to spray an area with herbicide or pesticide, you really can't use that area right away. Like if you were to let your dog out in the backyard after you sprayed, that could be dangerous for them. Or the same thing with your kids running around. You're now eliminating um, kind of the danger by not using chemicals by using another method. And then also residuals. So residual is just how long that herbicide or that chemical stays active in the soil. And I've heard stories of people that will use a certain type of herbicide and then 5 days later they'll go back to plant and there will still be that residual in the ground. And now you've effectively killed your seed you just put down because that chemical is still active in the soil. So it's worth noting that that can happen, and we really really recommend that you read the back of the labels, the back of your herbicide and pesticide labels before you do any of this because it can be dangerous. And that kind of
Uh,
leads me to the next one. Yeah, I mean, Cody and I can talk both about this, but just the
God,
disking, right? I mean, that's what's used in full scale agriculture. You always see the discs running around on the roads and through the
mhm.
fields. But it is most effective when it's used in conjunction with other methods, right? Like chemical and smothering, because just by tilling, you're actually bringing weeds to the surface. You're bringing that weed seed that may be deep in the seed bank. You're bringing that up now, and you're giving it a chance to breathe. And you're giving it a chance to grow. Um,
Yeah.
so that's why we do say it's best used in conjunction with other methods, but it does provide really good seed to soil contact. I mean, you're getting bare dirt up and you're giving it a nice seed bed for that native seed to lay on. But it will most likely need a little additional work after seeding, because the native seed, and correct me if I'm wrong, um, Cody, but it's typically a 1/4 inch is the deepest you'd ever want to put native seed. And if
Yeah.
you're continuously tilling this area, you're making that soil, for lack of a better term, fluffy, right? Really light. And if you were to put that seed in, and let's say it rains and it pulls that seed down further into the seed bank, now it's 3/4 of an inch in, and it's not going to have the best opportunity to germinate and to grow because it's buried too much in the soil. So it is something worth noting that compaction, you might have to, if it's a small enough plot, walk over it a couple times after you put the seed in just to make sure you're firming up that soil.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you touched on all of it, Evan. So everyone's pretty much aware. Um, This slide is here just for information purposes only. We're going to touch on zone and plant times. So just quickly look at this and kind of look where your county is and just note that zone number in your mind. So pollinator grasses, pollinator native grasses. So in terms of the plant zones, I just put a reference down there on the bottom. Northern's going to be 1, central's going to be 2, southern's going to be 3. These are some time zones that we're going to be working with as far as like planting in the spring and kind of compatibility. If you're working with the warm season grasses, you're not going to want to plant in the late summer. They're not going to have enough time to germinate and see root before winter hits, and they will die. So you're essentially planting planting them too late in the year. So cold season grasses, you don't have that much of a restriction. You can plant in your three in those three respective time zones. And then the actual dormant seeding is reference to like frost seeding. So you're throwing out early, and then in the spring they will come up quickly. So those are kind of this, and this slideshow will be sent out for your reference. So you can take this table and print it off and reference it if you'd like. Um, I will say that these zones are not in conjunction with your typical gardening zones. So if you have your zone that you're like, oh, I'm 6A, that's different than these. These are NRCS standards for native plantings. So they're a little more general. So those zones are still your zones, but these are just for native plantings. Jumping into some of the tree shrubs plantings, we're gonna have a different kind of depending on how you buy your shrubs, you can buy them direct seedings. So that's going to be your bottom bullet point. Those are going to be more planted through October through June. Uh, a lot of these are going to touch on making sure that the ground is not frozen and soil moisture is there. So don't plant in a drought and don't plant too early to where the permafrost is still, is still frozen the top 2 inches. You're not going to want to do that. You're just setting the seeds up for, long-term dormancy, and you may not see them come up too quickly. And if you, for as far as tree and shrubs, they're not cheap. So taking bare root seedlings, those are pretty much the most typical route. You'll get your 12-inch to 18-inch bare roots, and these are your time zones or your dates that you want to have planted no later than. So zone 1 being the northern is June 1st. Zone 2 central is going to be May 25th. So you get a little bit, sooner. You got to get it in the ground sooner. The more south you get. Balled and containers, those, I mean, you're going to spend a little bit more money. Um, but those already come with the soil and the root establishment in there. So once again, just looking for normal precipitation coming, soil moisture, and the ground cannot be frozen. So it has to be uh, a good sunny day. So I wouldn't choose too early in the season to try to plant these guys. I'm just kind of skipping through some of this stuff. The fall seeding, we're going to eliminate the need for stratification, which is the need for the seed to go through a cold spill. Um, when you're frost seeding out, that's when you're fall seeding. It will go through the winter. It'll get snowed on. It'll freeze melt, and work its way down to the soil, which will actually stratify the actual seed for you. So it's already done, and by the time spring rolls around, it's good to go. Um, and then the spring seeding, you're reducing rodent and insect damage. So through the winter, these guys will predate on the seeds. So it's kind of you got to pick your battles with those. You can artificially stratify in your freezer though. So those are another resource we can look into to stratify artificially and then go plant. Some of the funding option Evan's going to touch on here.
Yeah, so obviously putting this habitat on the ground is going to cost money. So we do have a couple different ways we can work with you as biologists, work with you to try to help you out in the funding aspect of your planting. So one of them is the American Farmland Trust. They have a pollinator program where they'll give you $100 an acre for pollinator implantation. So that can be for the seed, that can be for the site prep. it's nice that you have the flexibility to use it as you wish, because some people, they'll have a disc, so they won't need to go rent one, or they won't need to pay extra for someone to come out and do it. So you can use that money all for seed, or vice versa, right? So I have gotten a couple people funded through this program, and it seems like it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. They get a quick response on it. So it's definitely one to keep in mind, and you can reach out to your local area biologist, and they'll help you out, getting the link for the application and everything. This one's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's cool to note. It's called the Pollinator Partnership. It's the Native Wildflower Seed Grant. The issue is it must be 10 acres, right? And that's where we're starting to get away from the small scale habitat and the urban habitat. But it does give special attention, and it'll give you more money if you're willing to open up your area for outreach and education and volunteer opportunities, like having an elementary class come out and look at the butterflies and look at the plants. They'll give you money, and they'll give you money for management to help out with that. And then also the PF and the QF Illinois chapter habitat grants, right? For this specifically, um, too small of scale projects probably won't do too well in our application process because it is competitive. Um, but we do offer up to 100 acres, $100 an acre for native seed. So it is a pretty substantial amount. And then along with that, we also help cost share prescribed burning, herbicide, the application and the actual cost, and then equipment rental and even more. So that's
Mhm.
definitely something I would reach out to your chapter, your local chapter, or your local biologist about if you have a project in mind that, is a couple acres and you just need help, A, with planning it, but B, also with funding.
Absolutely. So specifics are going to be required for this stuff. So definitely reach out because you're going to have to go through kind of where you're at, what you're doing, and how much you're doing it. So that's going to determine which funding pool we throw you guys in. We typically will throw you in the best hit to allow you to have the best shot. And equip. We're going to talk quickly about some equip, and I think Evan's going to touch on these as well.
Yeah, so EQIP is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And it is an NRCS program. It's a government conservation program. The cool thing about it is you don't need cropping history like CRP. So this directly gears towards people who are trying to do something on their land that is kind of set aside, right? It's an extra bit of your yard, you're not cropping. Um, or if you have a little area, I don't know, as a entrance to your field, right? That's just grass and it's something you want to do on, but you wouldn't be able to do it through CRP because it's not technically being cropped.
Mhm.
It is important to note that it's not a yearly payment rate like the Conservation Reserve Program CRP, like we were talking about earlier. It is basically paid for completing the practice. And I know Cody had a pretty good way for you guys to understand this because it can be confusing.
Yeah. So CRP is going to be more for those cropping guys out in the rural area, the ones that are doing row cropping and getting out of it. Equip is more of a fix it program. If you just bought a 20-acre plot or a 15-acre plot, this is getting away from the small scale stuff. But those other habitat grants that we just talked about were going to be more for small scale. Equip is going to be that middle ground. You don't need cropping history for it, but it will allow you to fix the problem and get paid per practice. And then CSP will allow you to continue that practice and continue management on into the future. So Equip is just known as a fix it program. And then, like we said, just talk to your biologist. They will run through the details with you and see if your project fits this bill, literally.
And these numbers and everything after that, they were just examples of what Equip can help with. So
Hmm.
if you do end up thinking Equip can be an option for you, to reach out to one of us biologists and we'll help you walk through what we think can benefit your land, what you would be able to do. So
All
that
right.
brings us, it brings us into the seed, right? How do we get this seed for these urban projects? And really, any local seed company that carries native seed is going to be your best option, just because that seed doesn't have to travel as far, and you can literally just stop in right after work one day. You can say, hey, I'm trying to plant an acre pollinator, and I guarantee someone will be there that can help you out with that. And if they're not, that's when you come see us, and then we'll help you design a plan or design a mix, and we can go from there. Um, but I would say contact your local office if you're kind of stuck on where to get seed. Um, Basically, all offices will have a local seed vendor list, and this will steer you towards options that are close to you. And then for your trees and shrubs, I want to touch on Mason State Nursery, which I believe is south of Peoria. Um, but it's an IDNR owned nursery, and they specialize in the spring sale of bare root shrubs and trees. So a lot of these guys and landowners that are trying to get your shrubs to go plant for a project, for a quail project, for to line your fence in your backyard, this is going to be a really good option for you because they are sold in the peak planting time, these bare root seedlings in the spring, but also they're really reasonable price wise. So it is something to look into if you have a project in mind that would entail having trees or shrubs in it. And then also reaching out to your local soil and water conservation districts. A lot of these districts will have spring tree sales. So that's another option for you just in your local county that you can explore if you're trying to complete or trying to start a project that involves trees and shrubs.
Absolutely. I didn't have anything extra on that one. Management of habitat.
Yeah.
So we get this question a lot. We get the guy that plants these things and they call us back after year one and say, well, there's not, it just looks like a bunch of weeds. Well, in natives, they are establishing roots and deep roots at that. So that takes a while for them to get really dug down in there. Year one, roots. Year two, stem. Year three is seeds. So year three, it should be in full swing. You start see it should seeing, full blooms. And after that, it should be pretty consecutive with the blooms after that. Um, like it says, don't lose hope. Uh, just plant it and know that you did good site prep work to provide a good stand for those seeds. They will come up. The prescribed burn, if possible, if you're in a residential area or you're too close proximity to other people, that might be not be an option. But going in and cutting away things that you don't want in there and just allowing those natives to outcompete is a good management. And on small scale, it's very very quick. You only have to do it 2 or 3 times a year maybe, and you should have a good stand within year three. Um, Main thing is just knocking back those invasive and aggressive species. If you have them existing there, make sure that they're handled before planting. And Evan's going to touch on a few examples we have here. We can skim through them so that way we can get to any specific questions we may have.
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw in a few projects that I'm working on up here just to maybe give you guys an idea of what urban and small scale habitat looks like in the real world and what is being implemented right now. So one of them is a 1 acre pollinator plot up in Henry County. It is right behind a church. So I talked with the leader of the church and the congregation, and basically what it came down to was they didn't have the money anymore to pay someone to come out and continuously mow this. And it was kind of an eyesore. I mean, that area is probably about an acre and a half of mowed grass. And on top of that, it ponds pretty consistently in the spring. They said, so we thought that their best option was going to be to put it to native grasses and flowers. And the congregation wants something they can obviously look at and for it to be something good to look at. So we decided on a pollinator. Um, and we actually got them funded through American Farmland Trust. That pollinator program I was talking about, it was a super simple process for them. They basically got the application, turned it in later that week. They had the money coming their way to buy the seed. So we ended up getting them on some wetter species, pollinating species, like your swamp milkweed and things like that. So it should be a really cool project. I went there earlier today actually to take this picture just to show you what the site prep looks like. And this was after 2 discs and then followed by 2 herbicide applications last fall. And they're looking to get the seed in the ground pretty soon. So That's just one project and kind of how it would look. Reasoning for why they wanted to do it, but then how we can get them funded as well. So this next one, it's about a 1 3/4 to 2 acre grass and forward planting, and is a purple personal property right behind their house. And once again, the mowing thing comes up a lot with people. It's just too much to consistently mow. It's taking too much time away from what they want to do. And they're pretty big farmers in the area, so they have all the equipment on hand. They just needed help picking a species because in this area it is pretty dry. It's pretty sandy soils. So I went out there and helped them um, kind of work through some different species that will do best in their site. So what the plan is for them is to site prep all this spring and throughout the summer by mowing and spraying consistently. And then they're going to follow it up by either a burn in the fall or raking off of all the residue to get a nice seed to soil contact area. And then they're going to go in with a dormant seeding this winter. So the 2025 to early 2026 time range. And I did say, right, they're site prepping from spring to summer and all throughout summer because site prep is the most important thing for these natives. If we can give them the best possible chance, the most seed to soil contact, the best seed to soil contact, right? The least amount of invasives to compete with. That's when you're going to see these really nice pollinator, properties pop up. And then one last one is it's getting away from the small scale, but it's definitely urban habitat. So it's a 6 acre pollinator planting again in Henry County. But this one's pretty cool. It's actually two of us Pheasants Forever biologists working with the city and their maintenance team on this 6 acres. It's right along the Hennepin Canal. If any of you are familiar with Northern Illinois, you probably know what the canal is. And once again, it's just they're trying to reduce the cost of mowing every year. And it's an eyesore, just a big open lot like that, continuously mowed. So they're trying to put a pollinator habitat, a project down there, and it's going to be really cool because it's a high traffic area, right? There's people running and biking and jogging up and down the canal basically all year, but especially in the summer when it's going to be utilized the most. And that's obviously when the pollinator is going to be looking the best. In funding wise, it's really cool. So a previous biologist who now works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife as a private lands biologist, he's actually going to be funding most of the seed cost, which for 6 acres can be pretty daunting, especially for your pollinator seed, because that tends to be a little more expensive than anything else. But yeah, so he's working with Pheasants Forever and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife on his project, on the city's project. So it should be really cool here in a couple of years.
All right. We got one more. This is just future ambitions of just the industry as a whole. This is why we have jobs. This is why we got into this career field, trying to implement these things in the most creative way possible to replicate what used to be. Um, where there's a continuous push for solar fields all across Illinois right now. So we're trying to implement native underneath those as a practice, as you see in the top right corner there. It's a continuous push for us because I mean these fields are just being dominated and they're getting overtaken. So you might as well put something there that's just the most low maintenance that we can establish, which is a native prairie. Illinois interstates, like we said, the Texas DOT is already kind of doing it. We're trying to connect with IDOT to allow our interstate sides to look a little better. It might just bring people here for, boosting economy just to be able to drive the roads. I know a lot of people are missing like that old remnant prairie type feel. Everyone's watched Little House on the Prairie, and we don't get much of that anymore. And then school campuses just alongside roads and along, towns and stuff, trying to incorporate these things anywhere and everywhere we can commercially is, and that's where you guys come into play, is allowing your voice to be heard, getting four or five enthusiasts in your area and making a point, writing your our governor, writing your towns, and just start that ball. It might roll into something and you never know. So we're just there's a lot of interesting ways we can implement natives, and no ways out of the question until we've tried it. So that we went over a little bit, but these are our contact information in our counties covered. There are biologists in every county of Illinois right now, and we will have someone to help you. As far as questions, do we have anything? I actually can't see. Can you see the chat, Evan?
Uh, I can. I don't see anything in it right now.
Okay. We're going to stick around for a little bit, and if anyone has any specific questions, we're more than happy to help in either guiding you on the future direction, maybe put you in contact with one of our biologists. That link at the bottom right there is going to be our full list of Illinois biologists, so you can contact those guys directly. They will help you in your specific case, and then maybe just help you being an advocate for whatever you have an idea for.
Yeah.
So.
No, thanks everyone for listening to us, and hopefully you find something from this presentation that maybe strikes your interest in something you can do, or maybe it's something tell your friends or you tell your congressman or your congresswoman or your town about, and it helps make a real change because that's what we're striving for.
Absolutely. So see everyone, and we'll stick around for any questions. I can't see the like attendees list or anything, so I don't know if anybody's sticking around yet.
Um, yeah, I'll look in the chat.
Participants. Oh, attendees. There we go. Oh, Miss Barb's in. I see that. She's probably going to be one of the best pollinators in the Southern Illinois hemisphere down here.
Oh, we did get a question from Ed. He just said, thanks for the presentation. He was wondering about the biologist in his area, but he sees the link, so he'll go to that. So, yeah, if you need any help with anything, I would definitely, it'd be my first contact would be to reach out to your biologist in your area.
Okay. And you're more than welcome to email us directly. We'll get that name to you and contact information pretty quick. So
Yep.
that way you don't have to go out of your way.
Like Barb said, thanks for all the great info. Thanks for listening to us, Barb. We appreciate it. Very good question, Daniel. So, Daniel asked, how do you manage natives under solar panels? So technically, they're not under the solar panels. Where these um, solar panels would be placed, and they're placed in a spacing, which I don't know off the top of my head, the the actual square footage of the spacing, but they are spaced out where there is a strip of grass or of good dirt in between each solar panel. And what tends to be happening with these solar fields is every 2 weeks they send someone out there with a mower to mow these down because they don't want the grass to get too high to where it's blocking the light from hitting the solar panel, right? So in a lot of these solar panel projects that I've read about in research, they're obviously picking species that are, you know, lower growing species. So not your switchgrass or your Indian grass, but your little blue stem and your prairie grass, your sand prairie, um, prairie seed, and
Mhm.
species like that are going to grow lower, so they're not going to affect the sunlight hitting the pollinator or hitting the solar panel. But and obviously that's creating good habitat, but also it's helping the physical solar panel itself because a lot of these areas, just due to the compaction of all of the trucks and everything that put these panels there, they're actually creating ponding areas because that soil is so compacted. But so by planting these natives, as we talked about, it's going to help absorb that water so much better, and that's going to increase the lifespan of these solar panels.
Absolutely. There's one additional plus too is we do have like native varieties that are more prone to being shade tolerant. So you can get away with it. It might not be a remnant prairie species, but they are native. So you can incorporate those guys underneath that can tolerate those long hours of indirect sunlight that still are very low maintenance. And then your typical remnant prairie natives, warm season grasses, and your strips that get full sun. Some of the actual panels are at a degree too that would allow a lot of sunlight in too. So uh, we you kind of have to get creative and with your species selection when dealing with stuff like that. I know dust and debris is a big issue with mowing those things too.
Yep.
The grass, you're throwing dust and grass clippings everywhere, which in turn gets on all your electrical and the actual solar panel itself, which then requires washing. It's an endless ball of labor. So we're trying to
And
promote less labor.
some of these solar fields too are huge. Like they're a couple hundred acres in size. So obviously you're not going to get a couple hundred acres of habitat, but maybe you're getting 50 or 60 actual acres of habitat just between the strips down in between the solar panels, but also the surrounding area, right? So it's definitely something cool that I think in the future will be super beneficial to the pollinators.
I would uh I would go out on a limb and say I feel like how um, coal coal plants are required to do reclamation, like the Reclamation Act.
Yeah,
I would beg to differ because solar is making such a big push that I would like to push for something like an act to
right.
require them to restore the ground that they just, like you said, compacted and ran over for 6 months trying to build this solar field.
Yep.
And I think that this stuff should be standard.
Yeah. Because a
So
lot of these
those
solar fields they're being put in ag land. They're being put
Mhm.
in open dirt areas. So the compaction is a real issue and that causes ponding. And ponding around those steel beams of the solar panels that are holding those panels up, if you can limit that water, I mean, you're only benefiting the solar panel itself. Actually, it's not just the habitat thing. It's smart on both ends.
Absolutely. Has anybody got any other questions? Hit us with some hard ones.
Ed said, I would think that they have the reclamation set up already. I Yeah, they might. I haven't done too much research into the actual solar panel laws, I guess, of implementation, but it's something just in the future with how exponentially growing these solar fields are, that if it's not already, or even if it is, if they're just planting, cool season grasses, then maybe we can try to change that to warm season native species and forbs. Daniel said your link to Farm Bill Biologist came up as an error.
Okay. If any of you guys have questions about who your specific biologists are, I will pull up the biologists now,
Yeah,
and
I'll
you can give me your respective county, and we'll figure it out.
I'll
I
check.
went ahead and pulled that link. I did send it to Ed, and then I
Okay.
did just respond to Daniel with it as well. So hopefully that one's working. Um, it looks like you guys have it typed on there, right? But
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to type
Okay.
those links in that way. So I did pop it into the answered. If others are able to get in there, it's in there.
Okay, perfect. That works. Yes, we can send these slides out. If you could, you guys have our emails. Just email us directly, and we will respond, and we'll send you these slides over. And if you have any questions in the future or projects, feel free to reach out. We're here to
I
help.
I believe this is being posted to right to YouTube, maybe. Is that right, Cassie?
Yeah, we'll have the recording posted to our YouTube, and then I will personally send it a link to the YouTube to everyone who was registered for the webinar. So you all should receive that in your email inbox in the coming days.
Perfect.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you all again so much for attending and spending an hour or so of your evening with us tonight. So if anything else comes up, again, reach out to your local biologist and they would be happy to help you with any questions. And the link to find your local biologist was there and are answered. I can also make sure to include that in the email that I send your way in the next couple of days. So again, thank you guys. Thank you to our biologists, and everybody have a good night.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.